Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. A few more people who had signed up will probably join us in a moment or two. Also, a word of welcome to all those who are watching us live stream tonight. We'll see how that goes. This is our first or second experiment with having some parish meetings in a way that the camera can take it home as well. Most of you, I hope, have gotten a little packet of information, and there is a little opening prayer there. But my first word is not only welcome, but thank you for coming out tonight. And I'll introduce our special guest then we get after our prayer. So if you'd like to follow along with me, we pray together in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. A prayer for the sick, especially those suffering from the coronavirus. We pray together if you can. Loving God, you sent your Son, Jesus Christ, to heal the sick. We ask you to come to our aid as we continue to struggle through the coronavirus pandemic. May we experience your healing love. We ask you to heal those who are sick, calm those who are living in fear, be with those who have died, and bring comfort to their families. Protect health professionals as they care for those afflicted with COVID-19, and guide governmental leaders in their decisions for the common good. Help us to always be aware of your presence as we place our trust in you. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Well, thank you for coming out with us. Most of what you'll see on the slide presentations that I've done and also the Lynn Cummings Company are going to do will be in your packet, but we thought this would be able to see it and then go from there. Come on, folks, we've got some seats right up here, gentlemen. Thanks for coming. So maybe if Kathy Caliendo could stand up, who's our leader for the Lynn Cummings Development Company's program, and Lynn herself, one of the originals of it. So welcome to you all, and thank you for being with us. We'll give you a little round of applause for your work. How about that? Thank you. Have a seat. So what we hope to do tonight, I'm going to give a brief update on parish life, because a lot of folks are wondering, well, what have we been able to do and not able to do in the last couple of months with the coronavirus? Then my job is to give you a little bit of background of why are we even looking at the campaign like this at this time? What are the needs the parish has? And then I'll invite Kathy and Lynn to come up and really give you a formal presentation of the feasibility study that a number of you participated in. And we'll have a lot of time, if you care, for questions and answers and comments, and then we'll go from there. But again, I begin by thanking you for coming out. So a little bit of update on parish life these days. I think you're aware of the fact that we have a church with a lot of marked off pews. I'm estimating that we're getting about 150 to 175 people at each of the four masses, so it might be 600, 700 people. I would say that typically before the coronavirus, and not during the summer, we probably get about 1,800. Summer, of course, it drops off. So it's been a significant kind of cut in terms of those who feel comfortable. But there are a number of people who are also watching the live stream mass on the weekends. A number of our parish ministries are now beginning either a Zoom or kind of smaller group meetings in the ministry center. So we're beginning to open up a lot of the parish facilities within the social distancing and the masking that we ask of everyone moving through the fall. Our parish school is now opening fourth week. It's in school completely. We don't have such enormous enrollment. We have 213 students, so they can be distributed in their classrooms. There's 3 or 4 grades that are kind of maxed out with 22, and they have kind of the screens around them and things like that. But they have all the safety regards. They have separate cohorts traveling through the day. They have lunch outside when they can and things like that, so they've been very well done. Our religious education program has about 450 students. We have one in-person class at 5:30 on Monday nights, one of each grade. And then on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in the traditional times, we have homeschooling with the Zoom for the teachers. Our teachers and catechists have done a wonderful job of kind of keep up with things, but as you family members know, it's really awkward for a lot of people at home. So I hear that our 2 public districts, Downingtown and Owen J. Roberts, that originally said they were going out to the beginning of November, are on the fence of considering perhaps opening up the schools a little sooner. So I think they're going to follow the Catholic high school model of the hybrid, which students come 2 days a week, 1 and 3 days in person, and the other days are virtual, but we'll see how that goes out. I think some of you know that we had some pretty significant staff changes during the summer. Jen Michelli retired as Parish Services Director after 19 years, and Lindsay Randstrom, who was for 1 year our youth minister, took over the parish services job. Then she went, of all things, and had a baby, so she's out for a couple months. But God bless Deb Romick, who's coming back again to be a part-time filler for parish services. We were also very fortunate to get a nice young woman, Megan Carey, who's a full-time youth minister now, and she's beginning to work together and reach out to all of our young people, but again, within the limitations of kind of COVID and kind of Zooming and things. It's a little tricky for that. We're also happy that Ann Palazzi, who retired full-time as our coordinator of religious education, agreed to stay on 1 day a week for special projects. She's been helping us with ministry scheduling and with the safe environment things, which are kind of self-contained but very important for us. And then last but not least, Barbara Batt retired after 12 years as our front desk secretary. And we have a Roberta Dainton now working together with Kathy Keating. So a lot of turmoil and changes, and one more very special I think most of you are aware of, but if Father Kevin would stand up. Father Kevin Okafor joined us. So we're very, very happy to have him. And I do periodically hear a word from Father Andrew. He's the pastor in North Philadelphia, right up on North Broad Street. Pray for him and for his community. They have a lot of struggles there, and he's kind of getting it together, but he's got his hands full. And I'm going to invite him to come back and speak with us a little bit about the Parish of Our Lady of Hope sometime during the year when his schedule allows to kind of let us know what's going on. So that's kind of a real brief, hurried background to things. I want to move on to the context for the campaign. So if you received and opened in January our 18-19 financial report for the parish, in my cover letter, I identified these issues that are facing us in the next several years. First is that our Sunday collection income has been decreasing as our Mass attendance declines. Okay? Just a little sidebar in there that in the 25 weeks from when we closed down in coronavirus in March until the beginning of August, for those 25 weeks, our Sunday collection was down $51,000 or about 6.2%. Now, what has really saved us in that regard, even if you double that, it's $100,000, but the Sunday collection in cash basket, it's down like 60%. But many, many families signed up for auto giving. We have about 425, 230 now, so that has really been the sustaining of the parish operations through the generosity of people like yourselves and those others who are at home listening to us that are part of the auto giving. We typically anticipate about a 2% salary raise across the board, which the diocese has offered to the Catholic school teachers as a recommendation, and we try to follow suit with that based upon our finance committee. But when Sam does the budget, most people know Sam. Want to wave over there, Sam, our business manager, seen him for a few years now. Okay? We usually estimate about 5% increase in terms of operational costs and other kind of support things that go along with things. So the costs are going up and the collection's coming down. As you'll see tonight in particular, I'm going to give you a very clear picture of the debt service that we have. We have 2 mortgages that are kind of fixed rate until 2024, and then they'll be refinanced at that time. And if they were cleared out by then, we wouldn't have to refinance them all. And then we do have, at this point, our buildings are now between 16 and 18 years old. So there's a growing body of capital projects. I'll explain some of them. And we do need to, do we count 132 computers on campus or something like that? Between the offices, the classrooms, and computer labs. So you know that every 2 or 3 years there's some kind of improvements and developments need to go with that. This year and next year we'll be moving the parish school into a Google school. So that means all new equipment through there and things like that. So that's a carrying cost. The parish has made a commitment since 2006 to provide an elementary Catholic education for those families that seek it. And one of the significant costs in our operations is the parish school, as tuitions can only go so high to keep people involved. And the numbers have been somewhat declining because our families are aging a little bit, and so they're not having the 4th and 5th child coming through the school system. But our parish remains committed to help compensate for some of the struggles that the school goes through when the enrollments go down and the tuitions go up and the costs continue to rise. So those were the issues that we said, looking ahead with the great contributions of our finance council, this is what we face. So in some particulars here. I believe, myself, and I think that most of the Finance Council is agreeing with me. A couple of our members don't feel that having debt is a problem. But if you have a mortgage and you can deduct some of the cost, that's a help. But a nonprofit does not, as I understand it, really benefit from having debt. So our education center debt was refinanced in 2017. And it's 7 years, so in 2024, whatever's left, we will be refinancing again. It was a total amount of $3.3 million when we began. It's 7-year fixed at 3%. education loans, the banks can get a benefit from the government for tax breaks to give us a better rate. Okay? We pay $18,368 a month to that loan, and the annual total is $220,000. Pretty big piece of change. Okay? If we look at today, or June 30th, it was a $2.998 million left, and at 2024, if we just pay on schedule, it will be $2,389,000. So that's the education center loan coming down here. Parallel to that is the church loan for this building, which was originally held by the diocese because the banks don't get a tax break on the church buildings. So about a couple years ago, 2017, we refinanced that again with a bank. So the commercial bank holds both of them now. It'll be also refinanced in 2024. In 17, it was $1.3 million. It was a 4.24% at that time, and the monthly payments are $8,000. However, with the Finance Council's recommendation, back in 17, when we lowered the rate on the loan for the church, we continued to pay the same amount to get the rate down faster. So we've been paying an extra $5,700 a month to get that loan out of the way, because that's a pretty steep rate compared to the others. So if you look at that, okay, we have an annual total of $386,000 that's being paid out in interest and principal in the loans. That's operating cash that's already spoken for before we do anything. One of my concerns is that the better we can address that operating cash would be released into other programs and parish activities. So that's my hope and goal, okay? So if we do nothing, then back in 2024, we'll still have a $2.5 million mortgage there. Everybody clear on that? Make sense? I know I'm going quick, but you have the papers with you. Okay. So another major concern of us is capital projects as they go. And I just threw together for the next 3 years, and I'm not going to look at all the detail, but just give you some feel for what do I need all that money for? Okay? So our chiller compressor, number one, went down, and that's going to be about $70,000 to replace. We have a second chiller that's still working, but it's also 15 years old, so what's the life expectancy on that? Okay? The church carpeting has been changed since the beginning in 2005. All the woodwork in the church has not been touched till 2005. Outside, the loop road seal coating, pavement striping, asphalt repaving, different sections of the property have to go now, all of that outside driveway and parking lots. We did have substantial amounts of that, about $400,000 worth in a settlement with the company that did the first thing. That was about 7, 8 years ago, so again, we're showing that where it's going. Okay? So we look at under drains or stormwater, little projects like the kitchen ceiling over the education center, controller work, electrical work. We're transforming all the outside lights to LED, which gives us much more life expectancy, but that's a new light bulb, but also a new ballast controller on that. It's not just a light bulb, okay? So we anticipate over the next 3 years to have somewhere in the area of $436,000 of capital projects that are going to be arising in the course of the time. Okay, about 150 a year, you see it go through, okay? I think you might have noticed in the bulletin that we had several years of hailstorms, and that all of the slate and metal roofing in the education center, church, and ministry center is going to be replaced with insurance money. We were hoping to get it done in the summer, but between the diocese and the companies in COVID processing, both contracts have been signed, but they haven't gotten to do it yet. That was a $460,000 price tag that, thank God, the insurance is taken care of, because that's going to give us brand new roofs after 15 years of use. So that's a real benefit to us. So in terms of cost, there we are. The last thing is not as clear, but you'll see it on your paper. You have a grade paper that has it all in one sheet. I just wanted to show you, with those realities, our operating, our capital projects, and our debt service, and our continued support of the parish school, our fundamental areas. Okay? At June 30th, 2020, okay, we had a combined cash bank balance of $1.2 million. That looks pretty good. Say, hey, notice PPP loan, $440,000. So we participated in our protection payroll plan for both our parish staff and our school staff, because we laid no full-time workers off at all. And so that really kicked into that. So if you want to take that out, you take the $440,000 out, you see what we would have been normally, about 800 some, okay? So this year worked out very well, and also we got a supplement in terms of the payroll protection plan. So here's what we look at, starting with $1.2 million. By next June 30th, we have $575,000. If nothing happens, cut in half. And that's with using the other half of the PPP for this year's work, okay? Little rider. Over the years, the Parish Finance Council has recommended to me rather consistently that an operation our size ought to have 2 months of operating costs on reserve at all times, which is about $525,000. In addition to that, our current arrangements with our mortgage company, WSFS, is that we would keep a minimum of $500,000 in our operating cash and reserves while we're in the mortgage. That's their fallback. So by next June, we are on the hub of meeting those two expectations for what I would call financial solvency and stability. Everybody follow that? That's the good picture. If nothing happens, in 21-22, we'll be down to $160,000 in total operating cash and reserves, and all of the monies that we've accumulated over the years, designated fund and capital projects funds, is all being dissipated. If you go to 2023, we are $250,000 in debt. So when the Finance Council, our business manager, and I looked at this, we said, we're solvent for now, but we're not going to be continuing forward. So what do we need to do to address the issue? So my task was to say, why do I believe that it's a good thing for the long-run stability of St. Elizabeth Church and parish community to go in with another capital campaign, which is not my preference, having done several already with people, okay, is that it will hopefully address these major concerns of investment for capital projects, continued support for our parish school, and reduction of the debt at a faster pace. So that every year that we knock debt money on, that unspent money goes back into the operating to offset this. So that's what the gray paper is trying to tell you. Why I believe that we do need to consider seriously moving forward from 2021 to 2025 with a 3 to 5 year capital campaign parish-wide. It is connected also with our 25th anniversary on July 1st, 2025. So I hope that that would be kind of a, I'd love to have a mortgage burning then myself, but we'll see what happens. George has a question. Go back one. Oh. Oh, note number 2. Yes. The mortgage agreement says that we should have $500,000 in our combined reserve monies for their protection if we would default. I assume that's what it is. Is that what, Sam? That's the default matter? Yeah. That's a part of the agreement. Yeah. Yeah, it's when we signed the contract. So if we were not able to provide that, then they would come in and say, we got to look at that mortgage again. Yeah. So the 7-year guaranteed rate is with this assumption. Clear? Okay. Any other questions before I turn things over? I know it was very hurried. You had the paper to take home and look at, but I wanted you to see, why are we even looking about this? I think there are some serious needs in the parish community, but I also think that a successful capital campaign could really situate us very, very healthily moving forward for another whole set of years. How far out? I really can't tell you. I retire in 2024. At 75. If God is good to me and keeps me healthy, and you people continue to support me as generously as you have. But this is for the future of St. Elizabeth, long beyond the time of Tom Moen and the people who are currently here. It's for the community that we follow 2 and 3 generations forward that we're making the sacrifice this time. Any other questions for now? Okay, Barry, you going to switch for me? Thank you, Kathy, Bill. I'm going to turn things over to Kathy and to Lynn. You have a PowerPoint that you can follow along or watch on the screen, and then you actually have the summary and recommendations from the full feasibility study that you can take home and look at more in detail if you care to. So with you, thanks for your initial attention. Not too bad, 20 minutes, is that okay? We'll bring you right on up. Now, do you want to use this one, or is Lynn going to use that one? Okay. I'll leave that with you.
Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? First of all, thanks very much for coming out tonight. We had closer. Sorry. Oh, better. So we had come out about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and spoke with the parish councils, and it was a great opportunity to go to really bring everybody back together and to talk about the process that we've been through. One of the things that I mentioned to them that evening was that the last meeting before the lockdown was out here at the parish and doing some of the interviews. And the first meeting after it all ended was back at the parish again to talk about our way forward. So just some of the faces here I know and I've spoken to, and I know Lynn has as well, but I just want to give you a quick reintroduction to who we are and how we came to be working with the parish. Lynn actually has worked here before and had participated in the second campaign that you had for the school building and for the social hall and the offices. She and I had worked at St. Agnes, where I'm from. My husband and I are raising our children there. And about 9 years ago or so, she had come to our parish to work on strategic planning and looking at doing a development program altogether. And at the time, I was very involved at St. Agnes as home and school president and had gotten involved in some of the development work as well. So at the time, Monsignor Perez, now our Archbishop, had brought her out because he had known and trusted her in working with her for so many years in parishes all over the Archdiocese. So when I wanted to go back and start working, the first phone call I made was to Lynn. And since that time, we've worked in a number of parishes in the Archdiocese and certainly in this area on feasibility studies and capital campaigns. But my background really is in banking. And so this, to me, has been a great opportunity to pull things together and to work on something that I'm passionate about, and that is our schools and our parishes. And so that's how we started our relationship with St. Elizabeth's and continue to this day. So back in February, when Monsignor wanted to get started on doing a capital campaign, the first part of that is to do a feasibility study. And the purpose of that is to ask the people who are the leaders of the parish, whether they're leaders financially or they're leaders because they're so actively engaged in the life and the work of this parish, to ask them for their voice across many different issues. The reason to do that is to ensure that the campaign, when it goes forward, can be successful. And that means not only financially being successful, but this effort should be really an effort to bring the parish together. If it doesn't do that, it's not successful, no matter how much money that you raise. So as part of that campaign, we wanted to try to interview around 50 to 60 households. And as some of you may know, that timing in some ways collided with the pandemic. So everyone who was interviewed, most of them were early in the phases of that. Some of them were at a point of a lockdown. So just to give you an idea about that, we started the interviews back the first week of March, and we concluded them at the end of April. And so some of those were by phone as well. And for us, that's not unusual. That's something that we often do. And as you'll see in these types of campaigns where the focus of the campaign is for a financial plan versus building a building, it's perfectly fine. And we had some terrific conversations with the parishioners. So let me get started. I'll start taking you through some of the slides. And the first thing we like to do is just give everyone an idea of who we interviewed. What's the demographic of that? You have a very nice, large parish here and a number of very active people. So when we look to interview people for the feasibility study, we ask to talk to the leaders. And it's always open to everyone. So some of you may remember being at Mass or seeing the bulletin, and there was an invitation to all to interview. And that's a hard and fast rule that we maintain. And if someone asks to be interviewed, we always make sure that they are. So out of 50 interviews, we talked to 38 males, 36 females, and it was pretty evenly divided among couples and individuals. Many times, if there is a couple, just one person might interview. We also, as you see here, we had 36 of those interviews during that time before the lockdown started, and we had 16 that ensued after that for the total of 50. This I just wanted to touch on because it's really unique, and I talked to a number of the people that I interviewed about the fact that it's rare for us to have the opportunity to talk to so many people who were part of the founding of a parish. So obviously in an area like Philadelphia, that's not common. And for us, it was really interesting to speak with so many people for a young parish who had been here from the beginning. So as you'll see, we had 25 of those interviews were people who have been here from day one. We also had a few that were relatively new to the parish, and that perspective is always, it's a good thing to have. Sometimes people that haven't been here quite as long have a different sense of things, so we want to take all of that into account. In this particular campaign, because it's not the building of a building, there are no drawings or renderings that people see to have an idea of what this campaign's about. In the case of the time that we're in, that was a blessing in the sense that these interviews could be conducted over the phone, and people had long known of the finances because Father is so good about getting that information out to the parish. So the people that we talked to knew a lot about what was going on. But in order to make sure that we were conducting it really fairly, we wanted to make sure that everybody heard the same story and they understood the same premise about the why. So this campaign was it's intended to be a 5-year plan to address the financial challenges of today and strengthen the long-term foundation of the parish, to fund 3 specific areas of priority. Technology development and capital projects, as Father said, that would be 20% of the proceeds. The mortgage debt reduction, as he described to you the mortgages, that would be 40% of what the proceeds would be from the campaign. And then the endowment fund to provide support for the school and the education of the parish's children, and that would be another 40%. So that explanation was given to everyone, regardless of their level of knowledge about the campaign coming into their interviews. So now we'll start to get into some of the questions that we ask. And they're meant to be both quantitative and also to get people's sentiments about the various questions that they have and their feelings about the parish and about the campaign. So the first question we ask is really a broad one. How do you feel about the parish? And for people, that's different. It's however it strikes them. And we ask them simply to rate that on a 1 to 3. And as many of you probably realize, it's not a surprise, 80% of the people with whom we spoke said that they felt very much at home here. Some said, well, sometimes or somewhat. And one quick caveat to that is that can also be the case where one spouse is more involved and perhaps the other is not, or the other might not be a member of the parish. So it doesn't imply anything other than just we want their sentiment about that. But that comes to a 2.8 average, which is terrific. Just a quick point, and I won't read them here, but I want you to know in your packets when you look at this or you go home, and this presentation will be on the website. Anything that I have on these screens in italics are quotes from people, but they're always unattributed. So throughout the report, quotes that people might offer are always there, but they're always made confidentially, and that'll remain throughout the entire campaign. So then we ask everybody what they feel the strengths of the parish are, and that's a very broad question, and it's meant to be. So the answer to that is often based on their particular experience and the involvement that they have with the parish, and we tell them that. It can be completely across the board. So in their interviews, we take that information down, and then we don't weight it, but we take account of every time anything is mentioned. And in the report, anything that individuals mention even only one time is in there. But what rises to the top are these 3 items that we have here. The first one is Father Mullen. And I think certainly this parish has had the unique experience of having had a leader for the entire life of the parish, and I think this is something that people are recognizing. And then number 2 are the programs and the ministries. Practically every interview that we had with people, they mentioned in some way, shape, or form that they know this parish is really active in ministry, whether they are participating or they're maybe less active. There's always something going on. There's the opportunity for people to serve, and people generally recognize that as something that's available across the board, no matter what age you are. And then the community. Again, this was mentioned so often and in different ways. People have made a lot of friendships here, they've formed a lot of bonds, and they recognize that. And so that's something that, again, didn't surprise us, came to the top. Those are all terrific positives. And I won't belabor this, but you'll see. I just want you to know what's in your packet. Some of the additional information is in there as well. Then we ask about the areas of improvement. And we specifically don't say weaknesses because people who love their parish often are very hesitant to say they don't like something or they think something is wrong. And that's not what this means. Many times an area of improvement can be something that you're doing well, but you need more of. Maybe you need more staff. Maybe you need more funding in an area. So we're not necessarily talking about weaknesses. We want people to just give their ideas about what they think can be improved. What I will say in looking at this is that it's so common in our society and certainly in our region that the issues that have arisen are coming up from Catholics who are active, and they know that there are many Catholics who are not actively in the pews and engaged in ministry. And so it's an area of concern for everyone. But I want you to know that because the areas that were raised by people most are not necessarily specific to this parish. And that's just an important thing to consider. There are issues that need to be addressed, but they need to be addressed by many, many parishes. So what people talked about was the inactive Catholics. People that, and in some cases there could be people that had been more active years ago and now they're not seeing them. That's certainly been the case among many churches. They also talked about Mass attendance, and the only issue there, and it happens many, many times in interviews, is people are very particular about what Mass they go to, and if the time does not work for them, you hear it. And I would say that's also true. I've never seen a parish that's totally happy across the board with the Mass schedule. And then volunteerism. Oftentimes the people that we speak with are those leaders who are most active. So they recognize when they need more people. And that, again, it's a challenge everywhere. One other point just to make here on the additional list that I gave you is youth involvement, and I'll simply say that as well. That's certainly an area that we, as Catholics, as parents, many times recognize that getting and keeping the kids involved in parish life and school life is tremendously important. So again, that's a universal issue. Next, we go on to just their level of awareness about this project. There are many times that we're doing interviews for parishes, and the people interviewing have no idea that anything has been considered. The interview is the first time they've heard about anything. That's really not been the case here. As I know, Father and the councils are very transparent about what they're hoping to do, and so that was certainly reflected in that. We had 62% of the people were already very much aware or had become aware recently. And what they attributed that to was back in January when the financial narrative that Father sent to everyone came out. And that's really what they're talking about. These interviews were in March. So they were many times aware, and it was based upon that letter. Important question. Do you agree with the plan? When we get to this point, people really are wanting to start to share their thoughts, good and bad. And they know, and I believe they trust, that what they tell us remains confidential. What we're trying to capture is the voice, not trying to report on anyone specifically. But these results were terrific. 70% of the people agreed with the information as planned. And we had another group, 13 people, who agreed with reservations. And generally what that means is they agree in principle. They feel there's a need, they want to go ahead, and you'll see that in a few minutes. But they might have specific issues, and this group of people that interviewed is very knowledgeable about this parish. So they have very strong feelings about where they feel monies should go, and that was certainly reflected at that point. But when we ask about going forward with the capital campaign, and is this the way to approach the issue, we had tremendous agreement. 47 out of 50 said yes, we need to do a capital campaign. This next question really is perception. It's asking the people who we're interviewing, do you think this money can be raised here? So it's not so much a statement of fact as it is a statement of belief. What they know about the parish. Do they feel, number one, people will get behind this as a project, and number two, is it feasible? So in this case, we had quite a few people, 30 that said yes right off the bat. And when we're looking at these, we always look at the yeses and the maybes together, because people often have reservations, but they're reservations that are really pertinent to the issues. So in this case here, if you combine those, you have 96% of the people who agree with this and feel that this campaign can raise the money here in this parish. Once we get through that, we begin to talk about what does it mean to get involved in a campaign, both as a volunteer, but also as a potential donor. So obviously, everyone that we're speaking with is a potential donor, and we want them to begin to consider their involvement with it. So one of the things that we talk about is, and in this parish, because there have been prior campaigns, people understand what that means. That's not always the case when we're doing feasibility studies. So here, people are knowledgeable about what a campaign is. But we always like to make sure people understand that we look at this as holy work. This is not just the raising of money. We want this to be an effort that helps bind this parish more closely together, and it is a spiritual exercise as much as it is a financial exercise. And so what we want them to do is to consider being a volunteer, but also praying for this campaign every day, assuming it goes forward. That this is something that is good for the parish in many ways. It secures the future financially, but it also is an opportunity to bring more people into the life day-to-day of St. Elizabeth's. All these colors essentially represent whether people said they would want to get involved in some way or not. And there's a high level of volunteerism here, and we know that. So of the people that responded, we ask it in 3 different ways to get a sense of, should this go forward, are there people who will commit the time to do it? So we ask, would you consider serving on a committee? And some people said, yeah, absolutely, I can get involved in some way. I don't know how necessarily, but I'll think about it and I'll get involved. For others, perhaps what's going on personally, travel, family issues, they may not be able to. But we had a very high level. If you look to the right, the total number of people that said they wouldn't get involved represented 74% of those interviewed, which is tremendous. The benchmark here on the right-hand side will give you an idea of what we're looking for. So if we're talking to a parish and we have a very limited amount of volunteerism, then we know there's a potential issue. One, in enthusiasm, and 2, being able to make it successful. So to have 74% say, yeah, I'll get involved or I'll consider it is terrific. Then we take it a step further and we ask if they'll consider being a leader in the campaign. That doesn't mean a co-chair. It could mean getting involved in being the leader of a committee, perhaps the hospitality group, what we call special events, or the communications group, something along that line. Would you consider being a leader? We look for 25 to 40% of the people that we interview to say they'll consider that. And again, we had 36% of those that we interviewed be willing to say that they would consider doing that in the future, which again is fantastic. The third one we talk about is solicitation. Your parish is familiar with that because in the prior campaigns, I know there were many personal visits and there were receptions held in the neighborhoods. For this campaign, we're looking at that a little bit differently, so it would not be the same level of solicitation involvement as was before, but it's always good to get an idea of whether or not you have parishioners that are willing to speak to somebody else about the campaign. And again, we had a terrific response. 48% of the people, even though they said, oh, we've done this before, do we really have to do it again? They were really willing to step up and say that they would consider doing it. So again, we look at that as something that's really positive for the future of the campaign in the parish. This screen, and you'll see this in your slides, I know it's difficult to see up here, but I've put it in the presentation and the one following so that you can look at it afterward and you can always ask questions about it. This slide is something that we show during the process of the interview, and the purpose of it is just to give people an idea of what their gift might be, and what it's like, in this case, to try to raise $5 million in this parish. It's a way of quantifying it for people. And no matter whether they're capable of the very largest gift or a very modest gift, they can find themselves somewhere within this range of gifts. But within any campaign, in order to raise funds, you have to have a few very significant donors if you're going to reach the levels of raising money into the millions. So the feasibility study helps to identify realistically if that's possible and where everyone else is in that mix. So we present this for people, and it gives them something tangible in the interview to take a look at and say, well, and it's so often the case that people will literally take their hands and go, well, you know, we might be. And that's really what we're asking them. We're not asking them to commit to monies that day or in that interview, but we do want to get a truthful idea of where the interviewees are so that we can project reasonably what the campaign can raise. When you look at your presentation, these next two slides show those plotted. The only thing that I'll make a comment to here so that you have it to think about is people are asked to give a range because we're not asking them to commit to a specific amount of funds, and most people are not ready to do that. So we ask them to consider what their low gift amount might be and what their high amount might be, for whatever variables there are out there, and we all know there are many in the world. And most people are really quick and ready to be able to do that. But that helps us, as you'll see, to be able to plot where we arrived in terms of a projection for the campaign as it is today. So when we ask people, based upon their knowledge of the campaign that day, where might they be in terms of, one, their willingness to make a gift, should the campaign go forward, and then two, what might those dollars look like, giving the high and the low range. So when we aggregate all those, and that's the purpose of having the interviews, there's no names associated with anything. We total the amounts that we receive. On a low range, we had $670,000, and on a high range, we had $971,000. So if you're trying to raise $5 million, as you can see at the high range of just under $1 million, it's very hard to then project that you can get all the way to $5 million from just under $1 million. So this had a lot to do with our thinking in terms of what is reasonable and fair and prudent in terms of a recommendation. One thing with that, though, we did 50 interviews, 38 people, 38 households gave us an amount or a range. So out of the interviews that we did, 12 people either weren't sure quite yet or would likely make a gift but would know at a later date. So what I can say is, out of those interviews, we had very few people that expressed a reservation to make a gift. Usually, if there was not an amount associated with them, it was simply that they hadn't made the decision and they weren't ready to do that yet. So just in terms of making the final determination as to where we're going to go with a recommendation for the amount, we always try to identify about half of what you're trying to raise. So in this case, if we're looking at $5 million, we're hoping to find about $2.5 million among those interviewed that are making that pledge in what we call the major or the leadership level gifts. And that's simply from a practical standpoint. If among the leaders, the financial leaders and the major donors, you're not able to reach the level of about half of what you're trying to raise, you're not likely to make up the rest of that from among the rest of the parishioners that are out there. So it's really just a case of making sure that we're setting expectations in a reasonable way and in a very judicious way, so that when you get to the end of the campaign, you've had a success, and hopefully a roaring success. You can raise all the money that you want, but if you've gone out and promised you're going to raise $10 million and you raise $6 million is a huge amount of money. And it would be terrible to have that perception be that it did not make a goal. And so it's very important to listen to the parish and to the people that are interviewed before the campaign goes forward, so that we understand and we can make a recommendation that's fair to everyone and they can share in a successful campaign. We also ask everyone, and it's important in this particular case, how long you would like your pledge to be. And that's simply to give people an idea. Number one, this is a 5-year campaign, so they can make their gifts over time, of course. But it also gives Father and the leadership an idea of how those gifts may be realized. So in this case, most people did say, yeah, this is a 5-year campaign, I can do 5 years. It also is really helpful because they're willing then to go out 5 years and maybe make a larger gift than they would in only 3. So from a practical standpoint, I think that's certainly favorable. We also asked something that I want to mention to everyone here tonight, just based on some information that I had gotten. Always within a campaign, and I'm sure you know this, people are asked if they have an employer that offers matching gifts, and if that's possible to do. And so certainly in this campaign, that is something that's available, and if your employer allows for matching gifts, that's something that we're hoping that you'll consider and we'll make a part of. I had somebody say to me just this week that Vanguard is doubling their match for 2020. So where they normally match 50% of gifts, through the end of 2020, they're going to make 100% match. So if people make a gift in that time frame, it would be doubled. And I think there are other employers out there that might be considering something like that. So again, we just want to share the information with people. We also, as part of the campaign, just make sure that people understand there are many different ways to give. It's not simply giving out of your income on a weekly, monthly basis. There are also many ways to give, and often donors do. They'll give through securities that they might have. They might give a gift in kind if it's a construction project, so we make sure that they're aware of that. In most cases here, people are ready to give cash, they might give stock, but they want to make sure that as a campaign, we educate people on that they do feel it's valuable. So of course we'll be doing that. And then lastly, we talk to people in general, and this parish is somewhat unique in that the stewardship way of life is so important here, and it's really understood. But as a concept, there are many parishes that don't really understand it in the way that it's expressed here. We always try to make sure that we ask people if they consider every year increasing their giving. So just as you would look at any other responsibility that you have financially, do you consider at any point in time making an increase to the gift you're already giving? Certainly for people that are making those gifts electronically now and you set it and forget it, it's very easy to just not think about it again. So it's the opportunity in the conversation to at least prompt people to give that some consideration if they've not. And many say, oh yeah, I really should do that. So certainly we have a lot of people here that are very accustomed to it, and they're used to feeling that they're stewards and they're committed to living in that way, and they do consider what their giving is to this parish. So after all the questions, we take that information and compile it. And then all of those, and there were 4 of us who did interviews, talk to each other about their impressions. So it's not just the quantitative. It's what were those conversations like? What did people feel? How did they respond? What did you pick up as questions or problems? What did you pick up as opportunities? That interpersonal communication is every bit as important to these findings as the quantitative is. So we go through that process, and as I mentioned to you, the interviews were all done in March and in April, and so it takes us after that about 3 weeks to a month to compile the information and do the report. So the findings that we came up with really lead us to where we are today. Based upon the information that you have and that we've just gone over briefly, we as a team, Lynn and myself and the other interviewers, felt that this parish really is very well positioned to do a campaign. The sentiment here is very positive. People feel very connected to this parish. as we know, there are so many that have a very vested interest in this parish from day one, and that's something that really came across in the interviews, and that's extremely important. So they do feel that very strongly. People also had a good understanding because Father is very much a sharer in terms of the information, as are the councils, and people felt they understood the rationale for it. And again, that's extraordinarily important in this process. So we felt all of those things were really significant. And as I said to you, we also felt that the areas that people felt were the most significant challenges are not specific to St. Elizabeth's. They're challenges for all of us. There are cases in which we can have campaigns where there are really fundamental issues within a parish, and we would say, don't. And Lynn and I have both been involved in those circumstances. So I want you to know that it's not a blanket, yes, you go ahead. We've always approached this that the feasibility study is a separate body of work from the campaign, because we don't guarantee when we start a study that there will be. And that's an important part of what we see as a fiduciary role in this. So it's not a given. But in this case, all of those signs were very favorable. We also, of course, hope that we have volunteers to participate in it. If you don't have volunteers, you probably don't have enthusiasm, and you don't have people willing to go out and talk to others within the parish. And so that makes a campaign very challenging. So the fact that people are willing to get involved is terrific. And also, one comment I wanted to put on here, and it goes back to the fact that people saw Father Mullen as so important to this parish, and he is. But his leadership and his ability to communicate, as the councils do as well, the importance of this campaign to the future of the parish and the solid foundation to be on by the time you hit your 25th anniversary is certainly very important. And so that's something that will be critical to the campaign, and we see it as a real positive because people perceive him as a leader, and any campaign needs a leader. People with the vision to say, we need to do this, here's why, and let's get rolling. That's really an important part about it. So to the numbers, when we looked at everything, and as I showed you before, when we aggregate what everybody tells us in terms of their low amount of giving and their high amount of giving, we came up with just under $1 million. And based upon that, we feel it's very reasonable to assume that this parish can raise at least $2.5 million. And we also feel it's quite possible to extend that to $3 million, because there are people here who feel positively. There's the opportunity to gather this parish together for something really worthwhile, and there are people here who have shown from their activity in the past that they're willing to get on board, and if they see there's value in the campaign, they will commit to participating in it as well. So we certainly see that as something that's very, very positive. But what we want you to know is that we don't simply go out there and say $5 million because that was the amount tested. There was a rationale as to why, and we truly believe that $2.5 to $3 million is very feasible from the parish today, and that's something that we would certainly work towards. The most important reason to have a grounding of that is to ensure as we go forward that we're reasonable in the expectations that are set for the parishioners. We want them to feel that they're part of something that will be successful and that their role in it helps to get to that goal. And that ultimately together you do reach that goal and you surpass it, and you can celebrate that at the conclusion of the campaign, and certainly as you go out into the 5 years until you hit your anniversary. So that's why in these notes here I say that it's aspirational, but it's realistic. We want people to have something to shoot for, but we want it to be something that is grounded in reasonableness as well.
Excuse me, Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add one other point to that, which is that in all the 35 years that I've been doing this work, we've never had a pandemic. So taking that into account, we need to look at this campaign with different efforts than we have done in the past. And we're very aware of that as something that's new and that we need to work together towards. But I think when we're looking at these totals and you hear 2.5 to 3 million versus the 5 million, that's always a minimum. That isn't to say that we wouldn't love to reach 5 million. And the goal could actually change after doing a quiet and a pace-setting phase. So you're hearing our recommendation, but once the campaign gets started and we start doing the actual ask for pledges, should that first and second phase go much higher than what we have perceived in the feasibility study, then we would up the goal for the rest of the parish in joining in. So it's not limiting, it's reasonable, it's something that we want you to be able to attain, feel good about, and feel good about your success. But if at any point we see that we have undershot, then we're going to push that back up. Okay.
That, one of the notes about the pandemic that I was talking about earlier, it was just, the timing was just unbelievable. And Lynn and I were actually talking about it earlier, that we really remembered those few days that we were here. Typically, when we're doing a feasibility study, it's over a week, and we're usually on site. There might be a few interviews that are done by the phone, but most are on site, and it's over a short period of time. And that was our intent here. So most of the interviews, all of them that were in person, were from about March 4th to the 8th. And in those last couple of days, it was over a weekend, when we were here, we were bringing the hand sanitizer, we had wipes for the room. It was right at the time when people were becoming aware of it. But of course, we were still able to be out and about. And I think it was within the week that the lockdown actually took place. And that's ultimately what resulted in the number of phone interviews that we had. So as we were gathering back together and looking at the plan going forward, one of the first things that we said, and Father and I talked about it with Father Kevin, was we know the pandemic has many and varied effects. We know it affects households in a different way. Some relatively unscathed. Some, it's the isolation from family and friends. It's some people that have seniors are concerned about health. Others might be concerned about health. Some have had very personal contacts with it because of either people who are ill or the loss of jobs, all those things. We know that. And so with this effort, we feel that we can forge ahead, but it has to be based upon the voice of the parish. And that's really what we're looking at, is trying to move ahead, but not move ahead in a disrespectful way or a way that doesn't take all of that into account. You have a parish of many households, and people are all across that spectrum. So our effort in doing this is to just begin the process, because it is a 5-year campaign. And we feel that it's the opportunity now to start talking to the leaders and begin to forge ahead in that way. But I want you to know from both Lynn and my perspective, and I'm sure for all of us here and in the leadership of the parish, that that effort is going to be very much respective of everything that's happening. And knowing that we have time to allow everything to unfold and for people to react in the way that they're best able. And that's how we'll move ahead. So let me just go through these real quick, and then something that Lynn is talking about is real important. So just in terms of recommendations, we're here. We've done a meeting with the parish councils already, just to go through the detail with them so that they know. And tonight, both people that are watching the live stream and for you that are here, we want to make sure that everyone knows that they're invited to participate in the campaign. And we'll be starting that with a simple meeting that we're going to have on October 13th in the social hall. And that meeting is no commitment. We want you to come out and simply learn how the campaign will go ahead and how you might get involved in that. And we also want you to know that you can be involved as little or as much as you want. So your presence there that night and going forward, there's no amount of work that's either too small or too large for whatever you want to be involved in. But know that you're all welcome. You all have something that you can add to it. You might be around for a while and then be away. You can participate while you're here. So just know that you're not making a commitment that there'll be many people involved, and no one will let any part of that fail. So your presence is welcome and wanted in all of it, and don't feel that you have to give over so much of your time that it would make it impossible. So just as part of those first steps, and what Lynn was alluding to a couple of minutes ago, is how we go about engaging the parish. And there's a deliberative way to do that so that we bring people and the parish along in an understanding that we can reach ultimately what that goal is. And the way that we do that is to approach the financial leaders first and ascertain what their level of commitment is able to be. And then we broaden that reach. Those phases happen, and people within the parish are not aware of it. One phase doesn't close and another open. It's simply a matter of how and when people are approached to ask for their participation as a donor in the campaign. And the reason is very much deliberative. We want to ensure that as we get to the part of making the entire parish aware of what's going on and that they can be a donor to it, that their dollars really matter and can get that last hurdle to get to the goal. And the foundation is laid, of course, by those financial leaders. So we've adapted our traditional process in this way. This first phase that we're calling a quiet phase is something that would start relatively soon, and that's something that would really be pretty personal between Father and the few households, and as you can see, we're talking perhaps 10 or 15, that are likely to be the major donors to this campaign. And the reason to go to them first is to get their voice and to find out if and how they're still committed to this process, because their commitment to it is so crucial to moving forward. So by determining that first, it helps us kick the campaign off with some momentum. And I think for people who may be less active, that sense of, oh, things are happening, things are going forward, we can participate, and we have something to look forward to in the future is terrific. That's an important part of building that momentum within a parish. So that first effort really will be something that's relatively personal with just a few households. And then we'll go forward with what we call that pace setter phase. And that's all people who might be ready to make a pace setting gift, a leadership gift to the campaign, but also any volunteer. So if you're engaged in the campaign in any way, you're a pace setter. Everyone who interviewed is a pace setter. It's really just identifying those people who are most active and most involved in parish life and getting their commitment to moving forward. And then we extend it beyond there. So that's just an overview. What we'd like to do on the 13th is go through that in some more detail with all of you and with anybody who wants to participate. And in the meantime, if you have questions for us or for Father, our contact information is there in the packet that you have, and certainly we welcome any questions. We know there's a lot of information out there, and some of these things you might have a question on when you take them home. So I open it up for questions now, and I also want to let you know that you're welcome to contact Father or Lynn and myself afterward if you have any questions that we can help with. Thank you.
So I guess for a few moments, the floor is open for some clarifying questions or things that you would feel you need to know from us to go forward and consider whether you'd like to come on the 13th, or if you can't come on the 13th but would like to be involved in a campaign, just send me a little email. All hands on deck. Anything you'd like some clarifications about or some comments? George, please. It'd be good to stand if you could. If you don't mind, just stand up so we can hear you. Thanks, Kathy. Nicely done.
One thing that surprised me was the skewing of the people interviewed. Only 80 to 50 interviews were with people with less than 10 years as a parish. 42 of the 50 interviews were with
Absolutely.
Take the mic in your hand, please. Take the mic, because,
So I think that was an excellent question. Did everyone hear the question? Okay. First of all, the process to invite people to be interviewed is the first important answer to you, which is that, as Kathy mentioned, we're looking for leaders. So how do you define a leader? In a Catholic church, generally we would say a leader is someone who shares their time, talent, and treasure. Those are very familiar words in this parish. They're not very familiar in other parishes. So when we first look at those people, there's a good number, more than in most parishes. And then we go back to the open invitation that's sent to everyone in the parish. Everyone is invited to participate if they would like. What we know from us, what we need to have in this campaign are the leaders. So we would love to interview the whole parish. That would be so wonderful. But if we come out of that with great ideas, a lot of opinions, but no money, then we have to come back and say to you, you don't have the money to do a capital campaign. So it's not skewed. What it is it's designated to people who we know first are leaders. And in this case, in this parish, that's the people who have been here 10 to 20 years. What we see as a goal is not just raising money, but that a capital campaign, as it has done in the last capital campaigns that you've done here, is that it raises awareness to people, not just of what money means to a parish, but what does it mean to me as a good steward, to me and my spirituality. And if we can bring people who are new, younger families to understand that giving is so important to that spirituality, then we've done way more than raise money.
how many people, we gave you a kind of draft list of potential interviewees out of which these people said yes.
Yeah, so that's the other part of it too. We had, we went through a process of trying to figure out a cross-section of people that could be interviewed that would at least be contacted individually to ask for their participation. So as Lynn was saying, you certainly an important part of that is looking at the leaders already today, but we looked across the board. So when Father and I and Lynn had met early on and began that process of identifying households, we really identified close to 90. I think we had 88 interview requests that went out, and nobody was turned down. So we really could have done more interviews, and we were open to that. The 50 was really because in that time, and as you may remember, we went all the way out till the end of April. Part of that obviously was because of what had happened with the pandemic and people being, there was so much upheaval. Those were all the households of people who we could get to actually participate in the interview. So we had some people that I had been in contact with that were either away or didn't have time, but have otherwise already expressed their interest in participating. But the number of people that were actually asked, or households, was about 88, and that represented school families, it represented younger families. We looked at anyone who had participated in prior campaigns, because anybody who had been in leadership in a prior campaign should at least have the opportunity to have a voice in this one. So we always want to ensure that we're giving fair deference to people who have participated in the past. But we had younger families as well that were interviewed, and either they got back and said they couldn't do it, or they just didn't respond. So that was letter, phone, and email, all those.
And in compiling that list, because a significant part of the campaign was support for the parish school, I included specifically a number of school families on purpose, which would tend to be the younger families, not necessarily here a shorter time. But I kind of bumped up the list with some people that have a vested interest in that we hear the people's commitment to the school. So that was a factor. But
right.
How many of those said yes or no to the interview process was...
Right, yeah, and then we did have a number of families that even if they were slightly older, and they, obviously the kids have been through the school, people with those connections as well. And then obviously we had people who are not connected with the school, but are obviously very active in ministry as well.
Good question. Mm-hmm. Any other? Yes, Bill, please. Say that again? Yeah, please. When you're speaking, yes. You want a mic? That's a very fair question. Yeah. And the basic answer, yes, that's still, it's not all that I was hoping for, but it's still very valuable for the parish. But I guess the thing is that we haven't recalculated the distribution of the funds, the 40%, 40%, 20% in the original draft, because that was being tested. So we might want to look at that again and say, well, for example, I put a list up there, anticipate about $480,000 in capital projects. Okay, well, we were trying to get $1 million of capital projects. Well, that's half, maybe cut that. So how the $2.5 to $3 million would be distributed, we need to re-examine in terms of what benefits. So like mortgage reduction releases some monies at some point, but not until it's kind of cleared off. So I would want our campaign committee to then meet and say, okay, if this is the amount of money we can reasonably target, how ought we to distribute it for the best interest of the three prominent needs? But I don't think I'm automatically going to say 40%, 40%, 20% if another calculation would have a long-run benefit. But if we can go $2.5 to $3 million, that would be a big plus for the parish moving forward. Someone asked in the questions, I guess, well, that's nice, but this gets us to 2025. Are we going to do another one? I have no idea. I don't know where our approach will be in terms of picture and things like that, but we can only look at the foreseeable future and be as responsible to that as we can. And I think that I try to show you that we cannot continue with business as usual and be responsible to our parish community. So yes, if that becomes a target, fine. The other thing is, and some of you were part of the three councils meeting 2 weeks ago, with all due respects to our professional consultants, when they do a $5 million campaign, they have a big chart and it says $1 million donor, $2.5 million donors, and that's the pyramid but our experience 3 times now is that we didn't have $1 million donor. But the width of the major donors kind of compensated for the lack of those kind of, I guess, exceptional donors. So our task would be to get a significant number, 700-800 gifts to this campaign that would be smaller in individual amounts, but larger in aggregate. So if we can get 700-800 donors, I think we can get $5 million, but you don't go out ahead of time on that. But it really does mean breadth of giving rather than that kind of typical pyramid. We've not met the pyramid in all the 3 campaigns that we've had before, and we've been eminently successful. Just so, for those who might not have the background on it, the first campaign was for $7 million for the buildings and such as, and we probably ended up with like 9 over the years with new families coming in. The second campaign for the gym and ministry center was $5 million. We got the $5 million and paid it off. We didn't get any more debt. And the third one-time campaign for the rectory was $625,000. We got that and that's paid off. So this debt is always from the church and school from the beginning. That's it, so it's carried up. But so people have been very, very generous in those second calls. We also had that little sidebar in there from the diocese. But that gave us an amount of, I think we made about $600,000 our share of the diocese campaign too. So if we can get a breadth of participation, then we don't have to have those tested million, $2.5 million, $250 million donors for their pyramid. That would be our goal, I would think. And that's been the hallmark here so far. But if it's 2.5 to 3, I'll take it because it's going to help us move forward. Good question, too. Anything else?
Let me just add a quick point to that, too. This parish is really blessed in that regard. There are some, not only parishes, but churches that Lynn and I have worked in that are far smaller, and they're very dependent on a very few people, and that's a high risk for a church. Certainly that's not the case here. The availability of people who might have the capacity to make a very significant gift, there are many that could do so, and they do, as Father says, they can help make up for a very, very large donor, that's really a blessing. The other thing to think about too is, and I know Father is, this is a 5-year campaign, and this would certainly be a case in which I think, based on both of your questions, would really be an opportunity to, the effort is not just this year, it's in the years ahead. So while the active phase of a campaign is relatively short term in the span of a 5-year pledge period, it would certainly be something we would support and help with the fulfillment of going out over these next several years. And as you have not only new people into the parish, but you have families that perhaps are more engaged in the years ahead than they are today, of considering participating. So I think that's certainly an important goal to make a part of the campaign. And then I think just the other is, in this particular case, there's always a challenge in raising funds when you're not building a building, in the sense that there's nothing tangible. But here I think people do have a very clear understanding that though what you're trying to do is simply raise funds, and that can be dry in comparison to building a new church or a new building, people do understand, and the focus of this campaign really needs to be making sure that this parish understands that all of those dollars support the life of this very active parish, and that every ministry that takes place from here benefits from the ability to have the space that you have and to support the ministries. So it might be just money that this campaign is for, but it really is about way more than that. And the effort from the communication side of this campaign really needs to be to tell those stories of what this parish does and means to people on a day-to-day basis. And that it's a 5-year effort. So it's something that hopefully by the time that we get to that 5th year, $5 million is something that you've reached.
Can you go back to your slide chart? Kathy mentioned that in the interviews, and I think in any kind of visits, there was the one we had the range.
Oh, the range, yep.
Yeah.
Coming back here.
Okay, just so major donors are from $25,000 and above. Well, that's $5,000 a year on a 5-year campaign. So I think that this is where we want to concentrate the breadth of the campaign. And I think that again, there may or may not be a number of individuals or families that can give those really tie-in numbers. But last time, we had a significant number of major donors at $25,000 and leadership here at the $15,000 and $10,000 that spread that over 5 years. It's a reasonable gift, but it's not a totally out of the world gift for a good number of our parishioners, other than those who have found the coronavirus either put them out of work or crippled their business. I mean, that's an environmental thing, but God bless us, in 2022 or 2023, I hope we're beyond the coronavirus, and there's still some time here. So, other questions? Yes, Jim. Could you stand up? You don't mind? Thanks. Choir.
I don't think there's going to be an issue with the people that are here. But clearly, how far from the death, 40, 50, 60%
Right.
that
Right. Right.
there any complaint? A capital campaign is great. And I'm sure that the 40%, 30%, whatever it is, are going to contribute. But what about the other 60%, the other 50%, whatever it is?
All right. Again, a fair question. One of the things that a couple of our councils have been working with the last couple of years is like, how are we going to engage the inactive and disconnected Catholics? Because if you don't feel part of the place, you're not going to contribute to support it. Okay? At the same time, I've interviewed 15 fundraising campaign companies, and I guess the rule of thumb hasn't been changed for how many years? The 80-20 rule, that 20% of the people give 80% of the money. And so I don't know anywhere where that has been reversed. So when it comes to fundraising campaign, I think we are like the rest of mankind in terms of that ratio. But hopefully, stabilizing the parish's financial situation would then give us some resources to more evangelization efforts, because that's been a gaping hole. Like I've said a couple times that when we passed our 10th anniversary, we got out of being children and we're into adolescence, but we're not yet adults as a parish. An adult is less concerned with defining who I am and more concerned with generativity to others. So there's a little bit of us still trying to get ourselves together as kind of a teenage parish in these 20 years. But ultimately, the primary outreach of our parish should be an evangelical effort to the inactive, disconnected people to engage them in the life of the parish. So I guess when I get itchy about that, I realize that 20 years, we're still relatively young in terms of church life. So I would hope that from the 20 to 30 years, we would be developing more ministries that would be particularly engaged with people. One of the things that I guess I found some consolation but not complacency out of in the remarks that Kathy and Lynn have worked is that the biggest challenges to the spiritual and sacramental and faith life of St. Elizabeth Church, with all the liabilities of some of us that are here for a long time, are universal church problems. Okay? Mass attendance rates, commitment to the faith, allowing your faith to shape your daily life in the public arena, family life, all those issues that we're facing, okay, are across the board. Now, I don't mean by that then we shouldn't have to worry about it, but we're not yet mature enough as a parish to spend 90% of our efforts in evangelization and outreach and engagement, and not just so much in kind of getting ourselves together. So many of our people who come very faithfully on Sunday are very, very comfortable coming to be spiritually enriched and go back to their life and don't want to say, okay, now that you're here, I want you to go talk to someone who's not here and bring them. That's a tough thing for Catholics. So that's our ultimate challenge is, will we be a parish in 2025, 2030, that's hallmark is that we really engage and connect this whole generation of the knowns and the inactive and things like that. So that would be a wonderful thing to say in 2030. But if you have some magic on how to reach them, I'm with you. But see, so I guess there's a consolation to know that the big issues are part of the church's big issues in our culture today. And yet, I do think that we need to get to that next step of, we had our wonderful series of retreats, you know, the Church, Christ Renews His Parish, and other together retreats. And out of that, a number of those who participated continued to develop some ministries to sustain their own spiritual growth. And that's a good thing. But for me to get some of the people who participate on a retreat to then become outreach ministers to people who are disconnected, we didn't get there yet. How many remember Disciples in Mission, Lenten series way back when? It was a 3-year plan. First year is to strengthen the faith of active Catholics. Second year was to go to the inactive Catholics. And third year was to go to the unchurched. We got a lot of people participate. They found their faith strengthened and continued faith-sharing groups for the next 3 years. But I couldn't get anybody to go knock on the door and say, you want to be part of it. So if the outreach to the connected has been a big, big issue for a long time. And we are underdeveloped and I guess I'll say in quotes, immature in that area of Catholic life here as well as elsewhere. So I'd love to get that going because that's where the proof's in the pudding. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It makes all the sense in the world. I want to say this for those people who were not a part of other campaigns. The reason that we use the range of gifts is because if there is someone capable of making a $500,000 gift, we want them to see that there's a spot for them. We also want people to see that there are gifts, 200 of them listed even on this chart, that are below $1,000. So in doing that and in being able to present a range of gifts, even though we are looking for a breadth of middle range gifts, it's inviting, we hope, people who may have never considered giving at all or don't want to give, at least they're on the chart. There's a spot for them. I think in a capital campaign where we are more traditionally using events, that the spirit of saying, see who we are, see how we love each other, don't you want to be a part of us, is something that's really going to be a big challenge in not being able to gather as we have in the past. And we will need, that's why this next meeting is open to all of you, because we really need input from you as to how we can use social media, how we can use other techniques to create the relationships, because when it comes down to all of fundraising, it's really about relationships. And if you are successful, success breeds success. Even if people haven't understood or gotten the sense of spirituality, they like to belong. People need leaders and they need community, and church provides both of that. Father Ron Rollheiser, in his book, The Holy Longing, says to parents, why do you fret when your children don't go to church? If you believe you're the church, touch your children. A capital campaign gives us the opportunity as church, as people, to touch all the other people. And in touching them, that's how we begin at least that journey of relationship, whether they give or they don't give. And I think it's really important to note, again, for people who may not have been involved before, is no one will be asked for any specific gift. They will be asked to make the best gift that they are capable of making. So there's going to be no requirement of anyone, so that everyone feels that whether they give at the highest level or the lowest level, they will be a part of the future of this parish. And God knows, we know more than ever that we need church, we need family, and we need community.
Thank you, Lynn. When you leave, if you go outside and look at the listing of the people participating in the past campaigns, okay, there's names on there that gave $50, and there's names on there that gave $250,000, and they're all alphabetical, because every gift does seriously count. Those of us that are more richly blessed with our resources and have the opportunity to share them, it's a great thing. But the parish community of St. Elizabeth is 2,900 households of varying levels of financial ability at this time. And I do think it's very important that in our outreach to them, their participation and their ability is honored and respected. Some of you heard me tell before that in the first campaign, a lady came back to me and said that she was over on 401 there, Conestoga Road at the soccer field right next to St. Matthew's there. Okay? And she said she was talking to another person in the neighborhood that said, I'm not going to that church. Said, new church, you got to pay $50,000 to get into that church. And my answer was, if I thought you could give $50,000, I would have been speaking to her myself. I wouldn't have sent someone to the door. So, but I also said to myself, I hope that the person that we asked to go visit that person did not walk in and say, well, you're rich, put up $50,000. See, so it means, I think we talk about how do we approach one another with an invitation, an honesty of the need, and a deep respect for whatever response the people give, because that's going to build the community. We had a company come in here in our first campaign to kind of do the presentation. We had 7 companies give us some, and this company out of New York, they're very successful at that kind of big national level. But I asked him when he was done. He was a high, polished, real. I said, will we have a parish left when you're done? Because he was like, you know, the only people to count are people who can really cough up the big stuff. I said, that's not what we're about. So an attitudinal framework of honoring, respecting, and including everybody is very important for the ultimate impact of the campaign, regardless of the dollars that come. And I do believe that, and I hope that this is successful, because that's very important.
You know, we see, too, in many of the campaigns that Lynn and I have worked on together, it's amazing the relationships that come from them. So just to your question, it's so important to have people get involved and make the ask for them to get involved, because for 2 reasons. One is, from the campaign's perspective, people's money or their giving follows their involvement. So to your question about people that are less involved, they're not likely to come down the center aisle of church the first time they come in. Perhaps they're not here on a very frequent basis. So they're not going to come down the center aisle. They're also not likely to make a major gift to a campaign. But if they come and they participate in something because of a friend, it could be something, not liturgical, but part of one of the ministries or something along that line. And they make a relationship with someone else, and that grows from there. And they're asked to participate, just come to a meeting and see what it's all about. That's the start. You might not receive a gift from them in that first year. Who knows? That's irrelevant. The important part is that foundation of the relationship begins at that point. They'll never be a giver if they're not already connected. And so we know, it just in terms of working with any parishes, we know that we're beginning with just a subset of the parish, of people who are already committed and are already giving. But what we want this effort to be is to be an outreach to this parish, not just for the dollars, but the extent that more people can be engaged in the life of the church will ultimately lead to even greater success on that side. And in that regard, you're talking time, talent, and treasure that are important.
There's 30 people here with us tonight. How about if each of you found one parishioner in your neighborhood who's relatively new and not that connected and say, hey, we're starting up this program. Would you like to come with me to the meeting on the 13th, see what it's about? We have our mission statement that says one person at a time. And those kind of connections with less connected people really are by personal invitation. I don't know them all because they're in your neighborhoods and I don't see them. So if you would go home and say, hey, there's a couple down the street that moved in the parish a year or so ago, and I know that they're Catholic in background, maybe I invite them to be part. See, that's where the message gets forward. And I think that's very important for the future of all of our ministries.
Absolutely.
You know?
And we see it so often that people who maybe are frequently attend Mass but are not involved in something else, somebody asks them, and there's Parish in Havertown, which I'm from, if anybody is from Havertown. But there was a campaign that we were working on there not too long ago, and a woman who got very involved with the campaign came to Mass all of the time, but was recently widowed, and she really was not very engaged in other things. But she decided to get involved in the campaign, and she said afterwards it was the best thing that she ever did, because the first meeting she came to, she only knew a couple of people. She knew faces or she knew names, and she knew a name, but she didn't associate them with the face that she saw at Mass on Sunday. And by the time she went through a couple of meetings, she had a group of friends, and that involvement spurred other involvement, and it added to her life. And that's the important part of things like this, and why we look at it so much as a ministry as much as the raising of the dollars. And being able to give people that opportunity and grow those friendships and give people a bond that they didn't have before is really a valuable thing. And it's just as simple sometimes as, hey, why don't you come out? The involvement that we're talking about can be editing a document, having another set of eyes on material that might go out. It might be being part of hospitality at some point for an event that could be held right here. So we're not necessarily talking about significant commitments. All things big and small are important. And for someone who's not involved, just being able to do that and provide the water or something for a meeting sometimes is that first step. But it's what that begins to create in their life and gives them the names and the faces that are the connections for them. So when you think about it in that regard, it really changes your view perhaps on how meaningful it can be.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Maybe join me in thanking both Lynn and Kathy for their work for us on our behalf, and thank you again, and we're looking forward to working with you whenever this unravels.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for coming, and if you have individual questions you'd like to address to either them or to myself, either tonight or my email, so please do so. Thank you to all those people that are watching us on the live stream as well. I hope some of those younger people are at home and say, oh, let me see if I can get involved with that. That would be a good thing. So we'll say a little stewardship prayer, and then you can go in peace. I know it's been a good night. It's about 8:30, so I don't want to keep you too late. Okay? So let us pray together. Gracious and loving God, we know that it is from your hand that we receive all that we have and all that we are. We believe that you call us to be the stewards of the gifts you have entrusted to us. Help us to respond to your generosity by our generosity to all in need, to respond to your forgiveness by our willingness to forgive others. Lord, help us always to place you at the center of our lives and keep us ever grateful for your constant love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. May the Lord be with you. And may Almighty God bless and protect you and your loved ones, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our meeting has ended. Our work has just begun. Go in peace. Thank you all.